Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Central Plan Package B Established Residential virtual presentation and discussion. My name is Ben Cdac. I'm the program manager for the Central Plan team. I'm here with a number of our Central Plan team to help put on this event. We have Deanna, I'd like to recognize Deanna Wilmhurst, who's producing the event, Ross Grant, who will be doing the presentation and answering many of the questions. And behind the scenes, we also have Kasia Toda and Brandon Underville, who will be managing the Q&A part of the presentation. Slide 2, please. The agenda for this evening is shown on the screen. First, we're going to provide a brief overview of the planning process and the timeline, and then I will pass it over to Ross Grant to give an overview of the proposed established residential policies and regulations. The presentation should last about 15-20 minutes and dive into some of the important details about what the proposed zones do. Then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and outline some additional opportunities to provide feedback. And lastly, spend most of our time with the live virtual comments and questions. In this age of COVID-19 and social distancing, we're trying to make the most of our online resources and trying to make it interactive as possible. So first, we'll be going with some call-in questions and then using the Q&A functions as best we can. Slide 4, please. Now, how to participate at the end of the presentation. First, we'll be going to the phone for the speakers list. We'll call up the speakers and ask you to unmute by pressing *6, and not to worry about catching all the details here. We'll go over the instructions at the end of the presentation. Also want to highlight the Q&A chat function highlighted, shown on the screen here with a question mark or bubble that you can turn on if you haven't already. And you can type in questions during the presentation. We'll try to answer them on the fly along the way. And then also at the end of the presentation, what I'll be doing is reading out the questions and either responding to them in the moment or elaborating on the answers that are already shown on the screen. If you do want to ask something that's more private, you can indicate that and that the responders can answer that way, or you can always email and phone us those questions. So I want to just make sure that part is understood. Also that we will be recording this presentation and the interactive portion of it and posting it online as well. And it probably goes without saying, please respect all points of view and opinions when we get to that part of the online meeting. Slide 5, please. So before diving into the established residential topic, I'm just going to briefly go over the Central Plan process. For those who may not be familiar with it, the Central Plan is the name of a planning project that's looking to update the secondary municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw for entire regional center. That's the Peninsula, Halifax, and also Dartmouth within the circumferential highway. So it's updating some of our plans that date back to the 1970s. Because it's a big project, it was divided into two phases. Package A focused on the high growth areas, centers, cores, and future growth nodes, and was completed in September 2019. It's currently in effect. Package B, which is the focus, which is this phase, focuses on all other areas of the regional center, including industrial areas, parks and recreation, institutional lands, and established residential areas, which is the focus of this presentation. The draft of the plan was published in February 2020, and it's a draft for consultation. And at the time, we had some ambitious timelines to complete the project prior to the municipal election that just passed in the fall. But of course, our timelines and engagement phase was impacted, along with many other parts of our lives, by the COVID-19 pandemic. Because of that, we've extended the engagement phase, tried to shift to more of an online focus, and there was a number of online surveys posted in the summer. And now as we kind of try to wrap up this phase, we're focusing on the established residential areas, which is arguably kind of the most important or the biggest part of the Package B, and also the St. Patrick's A site. At this point, we're tentatively targeting to hold a public hearing in the second half of 2021, which would be the final stage of the process after formal committee review and also a public hearing. Slide 6. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Ross to present on the established residential policies and zones.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in this evening to listen to our presentation on the draft Center Plan Package B, particularly in the established residential designation. Next slide, please. So when we say established residential areas, what we're really talking about are the areas of the regional center that are mostly currently zoned R1 and R2. So that's about 29% of the regional center's zoned land area and about 33% of the population. There are currently 7 different zones across 3 land use bylaws in this area. Next slide 8. Slide 8, please. To discuss some of the policy direction that has led to the creation of the established residential zone, I just wanted to I wanted to talk about a couple of different documents and sources of policy. So the first is the regional plan, HRM's regional plan, the center plan draft from 2017, otherwise known as the purple document, which was endorsed by council, regional council, the integrated mobility plan, affordable housing needs assessment, and analysis of population and demographic change. What these policy documents and analysis have pointed towards are 3 large main themes for the established residential areas. And those themes are that the ER areas are intended to play a minor role in accommodating population growth. Many of the zones that are in Package A of Center Plan, which was adopted by Regional Council of last year, are the high growth zones in Center Plan. In contrast to that, as I said, the ER areas are playing a minor role in that. Consistent direction to increase low density housing options, so providing a variety of housing options in the regional center is a key theme of the established residential zone, and to coordinate land use and transportation planning together. Slide 9, please. Just to quickly discuss some of the demographics and housing affordability items that have been going on in HRM as a whole, but also in the regional center over the last few years. Increasing population growth. So the last few years prior to 2020 saw faster population growth than the municipality had seen for some time before that. Decreasing household sizes have led to a change in the type and size of units that are needed to fit today's needs. Increasing rent levels have been seen throughout the municipality, particularly in the regional center. There's a decreasing vacancy rate, so the number of apartments available is falling, and all of those have compounded into creating a situation where there's decreasing affordability in the regional center for housing. And just one important thing to keep in mind as we talk about this established residential designation. Slide 10, please. There are a number of opportunities that are presented in the established residential lands. So one of the big opportunities is to align policies and regulations with the regional plan and priority plans. HRM has done a significant amount of work over the last few years, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, bringing our plans up to date and bringing in a number of new plans that speak to specific issues, such as the integrated mobility plan. And this presents an opportunity to align the established residential areas with those plans and that body of work. We also have an opportunity to simplify and standardize regulations so that plans and land use bylaws are easier to administer and to understand for the general public, enable more housing forms and uses that support complete communities, provide for more housing opportunities for owners and renters, and of course to support local built form character. Slide 11, please. There's 4 main planning tools that we make use of in Center Plan for the established residential areas that are proposed to be used. So the first is the designation. This is kind of the overall land use category in the plan, which includes major policy objectives and can also include character precincts. And the designation is implemented through zones and regulations. Zones implement the plan policies, and they can specify land uses and other controls such as height, setbacks, and lot coverage. So this is the kind of regulations that most people are most familiar with, where you kind of know that you have a zone attached to a certain piece of property and there are rules about what the building can look like in that zone. We're also introducing a tool called a special area, which implements exceptions or applies additional requirements to the general zone requirements. And we use maps in many situations in Center Plan to implement regulations in the form of a map based on a specific geography. So we're able to show different areas of the regional center that have different setbacks or different height regulations, for a couple of examples. Slide 12, please. So this map is showing the regional center, and the zones that are grayed out in that gray color are the Package A zones that were approved by Regional Council in September of 2019. The other colors represent the Package B zones, and I just want to draw your attention to the light yellow, which is taking up much of the regional center, and that is the established residential designation. That is where the established residential zones are proposed to be placed in the draft center plan Package B. Slide 13, please. So as I mentioned, this designation is applied over predominantly low-rise residential areas. The intent is to provide opportunities for a variety of housing types and forms while protecting the character of established neighborhoods. This provides opportunities to support local commercial uses, institutional uses, park and recreation, and urban agriculture uses. And these types of uses that are complementary to established residential areas. Slide 14, please. There are 4 zones proposed through the established residential designation. And I'll just quickly go through the residential uses in each of them now, but I won't touch on all the uses just for time's sake. But the established residential 1 or ER1 zone permits single unit dwellings and 1 secondary or backyard suite on a lot. The established residential 2 zone permits up to 3 residential units per lot and also permits townhomes up to 4 in a row. And I'll speak more about townhomes specifically in a moment. And the established residential 3 or ER3 zone applies to lands that abut urban structure links. And I'll also speak to those in more detail in a moment. But the ER3 zone permits 4 units on a lot and townhomes up to 8 in a row. And finally, the land lease community or LLC zone, which applies to existing land lease communities and permits mobile home uses. Slide 15, please. Center plan contains a map. We're calling it the Urban Nodes and Links map, and this map is called Map to the Urban Structure Links. And essentially what this map shows are streets with existing or emerging mixed uses which connect people and places of significant activity such as parks, schools, and commercial areas. These links often have transit or active transportation routes on them, but they also sometimes exist as a way for us to strengthen complete communities, providing more housing options and a variety of uses. On the map you can see on the slide now, the black lines on streets are the urban structure links. The large white circles are significant nodes of uses, mixed uses, and the smaller circles with the X inside are smaller nodes, minor nodes. Slide 16, please. So the zoning placement of the 3 ER zones considered a variety of existing conditions. One of those considerations was the existing zones. So is it an R1 or an R2 zoned area today under the current plans? It also considered the current unit mix and development patterns, as well as the mobility links and nodes map that I just spoke to a moment ago. It also considered proposed heritage conservation districts as well as existing heritage conservation districts. We also tried to minimize downzoning and avoid that as much as possible throughout the ER designation. And there are provisions for non-conforming uses and structures under the HRM charter and the proposed draft center plan bylaw that I'll speak to in more detail in a moment. Before I move on, I just want to speak to the image on the right side of the slide here. What this is showing is the existing number of units in each building. And this is just one tool that we used to help us place the zoning in the proposed center plan package B in the ER areas, and this helped us to understand the existing development that is in each community. Slide 17, please. Here's an example of zoning placement in Halifax. So you can see that the ER3 is placed along the urban structure link known as Oxford Street. And behind it is the ER2 zoning. ER2 zoning is applied behind ER3 as a buffer in the current draft. And behind the ER2 zoning, further away from that urban structure link, is the ER1 zoning. So there's a stepping down of the intensity of uses, you could say, or the number of units that are permitted per lot. going from the ER3 being the 4 units per lot down to the ER1, which is a single unit dwelling and secondary or backyard suites per lot. Slide 18, please. Similar example just on the Dartmouth side of the harbor here. So we have Little Albert Lake Road, I believe that is, and Victoria Road above that, just showing again the pattern of the zoning as it's currently placed in the draft. So the ER3 with the 4 units, behind that the ER2, and then the ER1. Again, ER3 allowing up to 4 units per lot, and ER1 single unit secondary suite or backyard suite. Slide 19, please. So I've already spoke to the residential land uses, but this is how the land use, permitted land use table looks in the land use bylaw. The dot indicates which use is permitted in a zone. I won't go through these all again, but just to give an example, the ER1 zone, there's a dot in the single unit dwelling use row there. So it's showing you that the single unit dwelling is a permitted use in the zone, and so on. Slide 20, please. Some typical built form controls that are proposed in the ER designation. Some minimum front and flanking yard setbacks are typically going to be or proposed in the draft as 0.5 to 1.5 meters. A minimum side yard of 1.25 meters. Minimum rear yard is typically going to be 6 meters. And that's actually being brought forward from the current Halifax Peninsula plan. So that's more of a regulation that's being brought forward. Maximum lot coverage varies between 35 to 50%. Although in most ER zones, it's default at 40% lot coverage. Maximum height is standard at 11 meters. However, there are 2 notable exceptions to that maximum height. Some areas in downtown Dartmouth, particularly in the proposed HCDs and some special areas, are set at 9.2 meters. That's about 30 feet in the Imperial. And 8 meters on registered heritage buildings in the ER designation throughout the regional center to discourage the tearing down of those buildings. And one other addition for built form controls, attached garages may be no closer to the street line than the front wall of the main building. And that's really just to sort of prevent the suburbanization of the regional center by featuring the home more than featuring a garage. Slide 21, please. Townhomes. So as I spoke to earlier, there are 2 zones in the ER designation that permit townhomes, the ER2 and the ER3 zone. In the ER3 zone, townhomes are permitted up to 8 units in a block. So what that means is you can have 8 townhomes in a row connected together before there needs to be a side yard separating them. In ER2, it's at 4 units in the current draft. So there's a little more separation there in the ER2 zone versus ER3. And this is really being brought in or suggested to be applied a little more broadly to the regional center because it adds an additional low density housing option. The table that we have here is from CMHC data, and it's basically just showing the average value of different types of low density housing in HRM, the entire municipality. And just as of note there is that the townhouse average value is quite a bit lower than some of the other housing forms on that table, just showing that it can have a lot of potential for being an affordable type of housing. Slide 22, please. There are 5 precincts in the established residential areas, and each of these precincts has with it companion special areas, and there are 13 of these special areas proposed in the land use bylaw. Excuse me. And what these special areas allow us to do, as I spoke to earlier, is make exceptions or apply different rules based on the conditions in each neighborhood. So there are some customized local build form controls which address things like minimum lot size, minimum frontage, minimum side yards, or setbacks, maximum coverage, maximum footprint for a single unit dwelling. So this allows those regulations to be tweaked for each neighborhood and allows them to be a little bit different and kind of corresponding more to the development that's existing in the area. These special areas don't impact materials or colors or other details. That's kind of the level of detail that usually a heritage conservation district might get into. And the intent is to maintain the character of these areas through preserving built form without impacting permitted uses. Slide 23, please. This map is just showing the draft proposed special areas in the ER designation. I won't go through them all, but they are listed there on the right side of the screen. Generally, there's a few of them in the south end of Halifax, the west end, and the north end, and Dartmouth has several in the north end of Dartmouth, as well as the historic Dartmouth neighborhoods surrounding downtown Dartmouth. Slide 24, please. There's a 3-unit conversion that's proposed for the ER1 zone of the established residential designation. This conversion would allow 3 units to be added to an existing building in certain areas of the regional center. And this is a modified form of a 3-unit conversion that currently exists in the Halifax Peninsula and downtown Dartmouth land use bylaws and plans at this time. The proposed conversion would allow units of a minimum size of 55 square meters or 592 square feet. And the intent of this is to permit larger underutilized buildings to add 1 additional unit compared to those other buildings in ER zones that would be permitted a secondary suite, or an ER1 zone, actually. The building can't be expanded to accommodate the units, and the building must exist as of the coming into force date of the bylaw. So new buildings would not be eligible to add 3 units, but any existing building within the conversion area would be eligible for that. This is more flexible than the previous conversion clause, as it does not disqualify buildings which added a small addition prior to the adoption of Package B. Slide 25, please. The grayed out areas on this map are showing the areas where the ER conversion special area is proposed. So these would be the areas of the regional center where the 3-unit conversion would be permitted. Slide 26, please. Just a couple of points on heritage preservation and the established residential zones. As I said earlier, there's a maximum 8-meter height placed on all registered heritage properties in the ER designation. And the intent of that is to discourage the building being torn down and redeveloped. The ER1 zoning is placed on proposed heritage conservation districts. So the plan proposes a number of new heritage conservation districts throughout the regional center. These are not currently heritage conservation districts. They will be planned at some point in the future. So in the interim period, what Center Plan does is it proposes that they be zoned ER1, which is the lowest intensity zone within the established residential designation. And the intent of that is really to preserve those areas before the heritage conservation districts can be fully planned. And I also wanted to note that this does create some situations with some non-conforming uses. So the ER1 zone, for example, does not permit townhomes. So if you had an HCD, a conservation district that had townhomes in it currently, they would become a non-conforming use. But there is a proposed section of the land use bylaw that will allow those low density housing options to make minor expansions within the bounds of the bylaw so that we're not placing a burden on those properties. Slide 27, please. Just wanted to highlight the Yonge Avenue special area, in particular development agreement policies 10.35 and 10.36. This is a new addition to the plan, the proposed plan. In the Yonge Avenue special area, there are some tailored built form controls, which are largely brought forward from the Halifax Peninsula land use bylaw with a couple of additions. So what this Yonge Avenue special area does is it brings forward the lot requirements, the lot area, frontage, and dimensions that were brought in through a amendment to the Halifax Peninsula land use bylaw in 2017. And it adds a front yard setback as well that was previously on a different section of the Halifax Peninsula land use bylaw. But what the Yonge Avenue special area also does is bring forward, creates actually 2 new development agreement options to support existing built form and context sensitive infill on existing vacant lots and on existing buildings as well. So there are 2 development agreement options. Excuse me. The first is for up to 6 units within existing buildings, and that's subject to some design requirements. And the second is for up to 4 units on existing vacant lots, subject to design requirements. The same lot sizes, but with more narrow frontages as the Yonge Avenue special area. So just 2 new development agreement options there to note. Slide 28, please. Secondary and backyard suites. This has been coordinated with region-wide amendments that Regional Council recently passed September of this year. This permits 1 secondary or 1 backyard suite permitted on a lot that contains a single unit, 2-unit, semi-detached, or townhouse dwelling use currently. And this is permitted throughout all of the ER, or proposed to be permitted throughout all of the ER zones. A secondary suite is a separate subordinate dwelling unit within a main dwelling unit and up to a maximum of 80 square meters. So a common name for this might be a basement suite. A backyard suite is a dwelling unit contained within an accessory structure. Backyard suites are treated the same as accessory structures in terms of their built form controls. So there's a minimum 1.25 meter front and side, 1.25 meter from the side or rear lot line setback. There's a maximum 5.5 meters in height and a maximum 60 square meter footprint and 90 square meter floor area for those backyard suites. Slide 29, please. Package B contains proposed shared housing in the draft. So this is a type of housing that's going to be proposed to be permitted in all residential zones at a compatible scale with the surrounding context. And this has also been coordinated with a region-wide project in HRM. The small shared housing option is a type of housing that contains at least 4 and no more than 10 bedrooms, depending on each zone, that meet 1 or more of the following conditions. The bedroom can be rented separately. The dwelling can contain medical assistance for the occupants. They could be provincially licensed under the Homes for Special Care Act, or they could be operated by a nonprofit organization or a registered charitable organization that provides support services. So just to give an example of the number of bedrooms that would be permitted, in the ER1 zone, the maximum number of bedrooms permitted in a single unit dwelling is 6. So in that case, the shared housing could occupy 6 bedrooms in that structure. However, if the building had 2 or 3 units within it, then the number of permitted bedrooms would increase accordingly. Slide 30, please. As I just alluded to, bedroom counts are proposed per lot to control density in the established residential areas. These are currently used already in some land use bylaws in the regional center. And as I already said, the maximum bedroom count ranges from 6 bedrooms for a single unit up to 10 bedrooms for 4-unit dwellings. Slide 31, please. Currently, local commercial uses are proposed through the ER zones, and these are proposed to be permitted in all ER and LLC zones. On the ground floor of all ER3 zones and on the ground floor of corner properties of ER1 and ER2 zones. The local commercial use is up to 200 square meters or 2,152 square feet in area and offers goods or products for sale or rent, including businesses that offer personal services. This can include food prepared on or off site, but excludes restaurants and drinking establishments. So really the intent of the local commercial use is to permit small grocery stores or convenience stores, for example. Slide 32, please. This map here is one piece of analysis we did to look at the coverage that the package A zones provided in terms of their commercial uses. So just to recap once again, for anyone who may not be familiar, the package A zones were adopted by council last year, September of 2019. And these are really the kind of high growth zones of center plan. And what this map is showing is the walking distance to the nearest package A zone. So it's about 400 meters, and which is about a 5-minute walk for the average person. And what it's really showing is that the package A zones already provided a significant amount of coverage for complete communities, for local commercial uses and other types of commercial uses, and that we've been receiving a lot of feedback regarding the local commercial uses as they're currently written in the draft of package B for the established residential areas, and we'll be reviewing that going forward. Slide 33, please. So a few opportunities for urban agricultural in the established residential and LLC zones. And these are all as accessory uses to the main use, of course. So the keeping of bees, up to the draft proposes that up to 2 to 4 hives would be permitted on a lot, depending on the lot size. The keeping of egg-laying hens, up to 10 egg-laying hens per lot would be permitted. The breeding, planting, and harvesting of plants, and the sale of urban agricultural products produced or processed on site. So as an example, someone might grow some vegetables on their property and then sell them at a vegetable stand on their property. Slide 34, please. So a couple other permitted uses that we wanted to note that are permitted through the ER and LLC zones. So each of these, there's only one permitted per lot, but it's a home occupation, a bed and breakfast, a small shared housing use, as I spoke to earlier, a daycare, local commercial use, and a medical clinic. So each of those uses, one would be permitted per lot, subject to some other requirements in the ER and LLC zones. Slide 35, please. One question we get a lot is how are things changing? And to help people answer that question, there's a comparison sheet available at centerplan.ca. And that comparison sheet puts the existing zones in Halifax and Dartmouth right beside each other and compares them with the proposed ER1, ER2, and ER3 zones, so the LLC zone. And just a couple of major examples to point out. So in the Dartmouth land use bylaw, there's currently no height limit in a lot of the low density residential zones. And CenterPlan is adding one of those. So we'll have a height limit, CenterPlan. Simplification and merging of definitions. So for example, the CenterPlan will have the same definition of a single unit dwelling where all the current land use bylaws have different definitions. And a standard approach to setbacks, height, and built form regulations with the special area exceptions. Slide 36, please. Just a couple things on non-conforming structures and uses. Non-conforming structures are buildings that don't meet a requirement of the zone. So for example, a setback. These buildings can expand, rebuild, and renovate as long as the nonconformity isn't made worse, but they cannot access new uses in the zone if they don't meet the requirements. So for example, if a building was closer to a lot line than the center plan draft proposes it would be permitted to be, and they wanted to add an additional unit that was permitted by the new zone, that would not be possible if the building was not meeting the minimum requirement of the land use bylaw. But the building could continue to exist as the same use that it currently has and expand with that use. Non-conforming uses are land uses that are not permitted in a zone. So these uses can continue to exist, repair, and renovate, but they can't expand. A proposed addition to the land use bylaw draft will permit low density non-conforming uses to expand within the bounds of the bylaw regulations. And that's what I was speaking to earlier when I noted townhomes that might be in some ER1 zones, just as an example. So low density dwelling uses would be permitted to expand, provided they could meet the requirements of the land use bylaw. Slide 37, please. Finally, just some other ways to participate that we wanted to update you on. So there is another virtual community meeting happening this week. That's Wednesday on the 26th. Unfortunately, due to the increasing number of cases, the walk and roll community walking tours have been suspended for the time being. Hopefully we can get more of those going in the future though. There is an upcoming Ask Me Anything session online on December 2nd, and we'll be releasing details about that shortly. We invite anyone who's interested or any community group to invite a planner to your community meeting, and that can be held virtually, and we will do our best to set one up with you. And finally, anyone who wishes can send correspondence to planhrm@halifax.ca, and we ask that you please do that by December 15th to provide any feedback you'd like to. Slide 38, please. And I'll hand it back to Ben at this point for our Q&A.
Yeah. Thanks, Ross, for that great presentation. Yeah, hopefully went into a lot of information that people are learning about. One thing I just want to clarify about the rock and rolls is that the tours had not been suspended. I think the best way to phrase it is that they're under review. So I think people know the situation in Nova Scotia evolving and the rules are changing. These walking tours are outdoors with masks and in small groups. So we're looking for clarification to see if that is appropriate. And also, you know, of course, people are encouraged to use their own judgments about what they feel safe doing. So if you are interested, you can still reach out and just be aware that that's under review. So at this time, we'd like to switch gears to the interactive part. So we're trying to make the best of our situation and this interactive software to have an engaging conversation. First using the phone and then using the online chat. And I see Kasia and Brandon have been quite busy answering questions online. So thank you for people for typing them in, and we'll do our best to kind of also speak to those as well. For those who might want to wish to join by phone to speak and provide some comments that way that didn't sign up, you can still well, I don't see the phone number online here, but if you have signed up and have phoned in, you can press *6 to unmute. Although I don't see anybody in our system, so perhaps I'll revisit that later on and can check in with people. We can usually see when people have phoned in. I don't see anything in our system right now, although a couple of people did sign up. So we'll keep on watching for that. It might jump back to the phone if they do decide to phone in. And if you haven't already been using the chat function on the screen, there is a button. You should see a button on the screen that looks like a question mark and a bubble shown on the screen. You can click that and you can follow the thread. You can see the questions that are being answered. As I mentioned, Kasia and Brandon are doing a great job keeping up with answering questions online. And you know, in an effort to try to keep this engaging and interactive, what I'll be doing is reading off the questions, summarizing the answer, and then also giving a chance for Ross to chime in and perhaps elaborate on. And there might be some questions that are just kind of a little bit difficult to answer in writing that hopefully between Ross and I we could speak to. So with that, I will go to the first question from Ann Dang, who asked about, do we have a maximum gross floor area for the ER1? And Kasia had already answered this and said that there is not used, that tool is only used in the downtown and the center zones. So in the ER1 zone, in fact, all the ER zones, density is primarily controlled by maximum height, maximum coverage, setbacks, and number of bedrooms. So density is controlled differently in the ER zones than the ER1. And also asked about the transition and how they work between existing and new plans. Brandon answered that under the old plans that they are currently targeting the second half of 21 for approval of Package B, and until approval of Package B, the current Halifax, Dartmouth, and downtown Dartmouth plan and land lease bylaw apply. So you can apply for permits under those plans until the public hearing is published, and then the Package B plans apply. Ross, would you like to elaborate on that one?
I think everything's been covered there, Ben.
Okay, thanks. You have another question from someone who's as anonymous. Asks, what are the plans for home-based business, and what about art studios, land uses which are currently already accounted for in Dartmouth? And Kasia kindly already answered this one online that indicates that home offices and home occupations are permitted in all ER zones. Work-live units are permitted in the downtown center and corridor and higher residential zones. So some of the more intense mixed-use zones permit even more flexible, but in the ER zones that we're talking about today, home offices and home occupations are permitted. And Ross, just jump in there if you want to either add anything or clarify. But I'm finding that Ross and Brandon are actually doing a really good job answering things on the fly. So thank you for that, Brandon and Kasia. And followed up to ask about the transition between existing plans and future plans, but whether or not if they had a development permit and a building permit before the adoption of Package B, but I haven't started construction, could I resubmit my development application with the new package plan, or do I have to submit a new application? And Kasia also provided a good answer here, that if you have the development or construction permit before the first notice, you will need to start construction within a year of the issuance of those permits. So if you get a permit ahead of time but haven't started yet and the plans change, those permits are still good for a year. But if you do not start contestations within that time, do you need to resubmit the application to meet the current land use requirements? And there's a good Q&A posted on the topic already on our website about this, because they can imagine this is a question we get quite a bit about when you're trying to change between an existing plan and a new plan. Yeah, sorry, Ross, Crashing and Brandon are doing a good job with the answer, so I'm not passing them over to you. Jason online asked if the GFAR is proposed for ER1 and if it differs from the grid used in the existing land use bylaw. And Kasha responded that GFAR is not being used for the ER zone. That's gross flow area ratio. It's a acronym we use. I guess those planners know pretty well. And again, we're kind of controlling density by things like max height, lot coverage, minimum setbacks, and maximum number of bedrooms, depending on the zone and type, depending on the zone, and sometimes the special areas. I have a question about landmark buildings, about repurposing included in this phase. And again, Kasha has provided a good answer here. It says, yes, they are. Landmark buildings are indicated on Schedule 48 of land use bylaw. It permits them to be internally converted into residential and some local commercial uses, up to 25% of the floor area, and the volume of the building is not increased by more than 5%. And to indicate that that's sometimes related to the ER zones, but really it's about places of worship and community centers. So there are often uses that are located more in an institutional zone than established residential. We don't really, and there's a schedule in the land use bylaw that kind of actually identifies these ones, but for the most part, they're not located in any ER zones, as far as I understand. Again, Ross, just jump in there if you want to elaborate on. But I see Brandon and Kasha has been doing a great job with typing the answers. Jason asked a question that Brandon kind of answered in quite a bit of detail, and perhaps I'll also summarize it here. Jason asked, what are the proposed ER maximum height coverage, minimum frontage, minimum setbacks, and maximum number of bedrooms? So these are things that Ross covered in quite a bit in his presentation, and Brandon answered during it as well. So just to summarize, I don't want to completely rehash what was in the presentation, but the maximum height is generally set at 11 meters, with some exceptions where it is lower. Minimum front and flankage yards are between 0.5 and 1.5 meters. Minimum side yard is 1.25 meters. The minimum rear yard is 6 meters, and maximum club coverage ranges from 35 to 50%, with the most common one being 40%. And the different numbers are for some of those special areas. There's also maximum number of bedroom counts. So right now, those generally apply closer to the south end of Halifax, as I understand, and are proposing to apply that tool throughout the regional centre to make sure that the density of the various low form density housing is at a consistent scale, and you don't end up with homes with 20 bedrooms. And it's listed on the Q&A form there. So that's 6 bedrooms for a single unit dwelling. Semi-detached should be 4 bedrooms for each unit. A townhouse dwelling is the same, 4 bedrooms for each unit. Same for a 2-unit dwelling, and then you get to a 3-unit dwelling would be 9 bedrooms per lot, and then a 4-unit dwelling would be 10 bedrooms per lot. So the density doesn't necessarily increase, at the same rate depending on the number of units. And Brandon clarified that all secondary suites or backyard suites are accounted for as the bedroom limits. We covered quite a bit there, Ross. Is there anything that jumps out that's worth clarifying related to a special area or anything on that?
No, I think that's been really well covered by Brandon. Ben?
Okay. Thanks, Ross. And I was looking at on the screen, and Deanna, if you could move to slide 39, please. I meant to kind of maybe spur some more questions as I continue to go down the Q&A, or for those people who signed up and maybe will still want to phone in. We're just looking, this as I mentioned it earlier at an initial part of the presentation. that we're still in the consultation phase. It's been an extended phase, but we very much want people's feedback. That the draft that's published online is a draft for consultation. It's not the final plan. It's not the one that we recommended, and it's certainly not the one that council has reviewed and detailed and weighed in. So we're really interested to know what you support, what are you concerned about, is anything particular we should be further reviewed, and what should be changed. And even some of these questions you're asking is giving us a sense of what's important to people, what was important to you, and what isn't. What are things that we need to, clarify for council, or just dig into a bit of detail. So questions are obviously also welcomed as well. So it's moving back to the Q&A that are coming in. We have another question from Jason that asked about. I think this is about GFAR again. Does this mean that a house that means the house has no floor area limitations, as long as it is built within the height, coverage, frontage, and setbacks? And Kasha responded that yes, generally that's the case. There's no floor area requirements, except for a couple of special areas where there is a proposed maximum footprint of the building. So that's the piece of part of the land that the building covers, and that's identified in land use file on table 13. And also for 3-unit conversions, the footprint can't be expanded. So the conversions are the provision or the requirement to be able to convert for a 3-unit dwelling is that the side, the envelope of the outside of the building isn't changed. So that would mean that you wouldn't be able to, if you expanded the building outwards, you wouldn't be able to use that 3-unit conversion anymore. Okay. Another question for someone who logged in as anonymous. And it's asking about auxiliary buildings, what I also think of as accessory buildings. So out a shed or a garage, can they be will they be allowed for home-based businesses that are not contained within the primary residence? And Brandon answered that yes, the proposed package B will permit home occupations in accessory structures. So if you wanted to have an art studio or as an office in an outbuilding, and yes, you could do that. But Brandon clarified that you couldn't have both the backyard suite and a home occupation in the same accessory structure, though. So there is a little bit of a limitation on that, but I think more flexible than some of the existing plans. Yeah, another question for someone who logged in is anonymous about backyard suites are permitted, but they have to comply with the existing building limitations. So under the current plan, they know that this is a maximum height of 14 feet. And in the slide that Ross showed, the last slide showed that they still have to comply with existing building standards, but the center plan is proposing 5.5 meters, which is about 18 feet, so about 4 feet more than 14 meters. And so they're looking for some clarification. Does this indicate that the center plan would have a 5.5 meter height limitation on all accessory structures? And yes, that's the case. So that's where that 5.5 meter comes from. You're right to indicate that the 14 feet, or I don't know, actually off the top of my head, I don't know how that translates into meters, is a little bit less under Dartmouth and the Halifax plan, and the San Am plan is proposing to increase that just slightly to 5.5 meters. And what that means for a backyard suites or for any accessory structures that you could potentially fit in a 1-story plus a loft. So it's a little bit more of a little bit more flexibility there, and that's one of the items actually we're interested in any feedback people might have on that. It was a topic on the survey that was posted over the summer, and it's one that we're still interested in feedback, or whether or not that small increase in height is something that people are concerned about or support or indifferent. But just one, it is a small change, but it's one that makes a difference between potentially a 1-story accessory building and potentially a 2-story building if you're open to having smaller floor to ceiling heights. Okay, Michelle is is wondering if staff will be open to approving landmark building designations internal conversion on the case-by-case basis. The 5% expansion limit is a little restricted if we consider some of the requirements needed to bring these buildings up to a current standard, whether it be stairwells or insulation. I'm not convinced the 5% expansion allowance is enough. Is there any discussion around making decisions on a case-by-case in order to maintain these structures? And Cash is right. This is great feedback, and we could consider some of these possible additional flexibilities. Ross, do you have any comments on the landmark buildings and whether or not some more flexibility is warranted, or any tools that I'm not thinking of?
No, other than just to say that of course we're still receiving feedback. So if Michelle wanted to send us an email at the Plan HRM email, but with any suggestions you may have for landmark buildings, then that would be certainly welcome.
Yeah, I think that's good points there about I think the 5% expansion was trying to provides a little bit of wiggle room, but perhaps as maybe it's not enough as we kind of think through it. You have a note here from Brandon. I stumbled a bit on the presentation. I was expecting a phone number on the screen. I think this is something we missed in this one. But if you would like to call in, there is a number you can phone now. We could kind of put you live onto this presentation and give you 5 minutes to either ask some questions or just make some comments. The phone number is 1-902-901-6948, and the conference ID is 485-288-283. So it's in the Q&A chat closer to the bottom if anybody's looking around. So if you do decide that you want to phone in and just ask some questions or provide some comment that way, we'd be happy to hear from you. Give you 5 minutes, and you can make your comments or questions that way, and we'll certainly record it and take it into account. So anyways, that number is in the Q&A chat for anybody who decides they want to pick up the phone and call here, and we'll see you log in, and we'll explain how to unmute should you decide to do that. We have another question from anonymous, somebody who's logged in as anonymous, and asks, are co-ops or co-housing permitted in these zones? If yes, what bedroom limit is permitted? CASA provided a response that indicates we do not regulate land uses based on ownership, but in general, depending on the zone and type of dwellings, single dwellings will permit. So CASA kind of summarizes the bedroom limits. So 6 bedrooms for single unit dwellings and semi-attached 4 bedrooms, and 10 bedrooms up to 4 dwelling units. So yeah, in terms of, I think that's a good point, because you often get questions about this as planner, about whether we kind of touching into regulating people versus land uses. So in our land use tools, we can regulate the size and shape of buildings, how many units there are, how many bedrooms, but we can't regulate. We don't kind of under the planning laws. Can't regulate tenancy, so we can't say that you can only be for seniors or people have to be related. These are all things that are really left to people decide for themselves who they want to live with and how they want to live together. So we're concerned more about the structure and the structure and the size of the buildings, not who lives in the building. So I have another question from an anonymous that indicates that, like many, I am delaying putting an addition on my home based on assumptions future land use will permit a more suitable outcome for my family. Variances are still hard to get, even if requested in the spirit of the center plan. Will that change prior to final approval, or better to defer growing our home? And CASA clarified that current permit applications will need to comply with the current land use bylaws, and if you want something different, then you may need to wait for the new land use bylaw to be effect. And I think I might add that I don't want to encourage you to wait if it's something you need sooner. So if you haven't checked in with our permitting staff or gone in, call 301 and see what the current rules are, you may find that you can do what you want to do in the current rules, but our staff that issues permits do have to comply with the rules as they exist today. And although we're proposing a bit more flexibility around the things that we talked about and trying to standardize many of the rules, our current staff need to administer the rules as they exist now, regardless of what council may be considering in a few months from now. So we're one reason why we want to keep this project moving and try to get it done sooner rather than later. So we can bring some clarity to how the zones work going ahead. Okay. Yeah. Moving to the next question from Anonymous. We have, what is the rationale for eliminating GFAR limitations? See it as positive, curious, since it's been a long time challenge for urban single-family home renovations, among others. Castro writes that we are trying to simplify some of the regulations. When you overlay all the regulations, they achieve a similar intent. Ross, I know you did some research on quite a bit of research on this, and I think found the same thing. Is there anything more you want to explain about why we're moving away from gross floor area and more towards some of the other controls?
Yeah, I think that Kasia has summarized it really well. Basically, the GFAR requirement is in some ways, you might say it's a little bit redundant, since we already have lot coverage and setbacks, and of course, maximum building height that really already controls the size of the structure. So beyond that, adding GFAR is kind of an additional layer that we know has been challenging for certain renovations and secondary suites and other units and things like that being added. So just as Kasia noted, we tried to simplify some of the regulations for low density residential areas.
Okay, thanks, Ross. Another question from Anonymous. Is it possible to increase park space as it stands? And where can I find the definition of complete communities? Oh, good question. So Kasia wrote that a complete community describes on page 25 of the draft plan. And let's see, Ross, is that something you can, off the top of your head, describe what a complete community is?
Yeah, I think the summary description would be a community where people can get their daily needs within walking distance. I would say that would be the summary, and a community that provides a variety of places of employment and opportunities for living, so different types of housing. But I think it's a little more eloquently written in the plan, but that's the summary.
Yes, fair enough. It's hard to you don't have the plan memorized? No, just kidding. That's great for that. So Kasia also asked to answer the park space one. He indicated that park space can be increased or can be acquired through subdivision, parkland dedication. So when new developments go in, when people are building new roads, there's a chance to acquire parkland that way. There's not very much opportunity for that in the regional center, other than the future growth nodes. So development of Shannon Park and maybe Penhorn Mall, for example. And they also plan includes a direction for the preparation of a regional center parks and open space plan. So for the most part in the regional center, because it's a built up area and all the park space is there, it really falls to our counterparts in parking and recreation to use funds that are available. And Brandon added that it's also one of the bonus zoning public benefits can include cash for municipal park improvements and acquisition. So we're looking to increase the funds available to be able to support our counterparts of park recreation to make investments in the park spaces and potentially acquire more land for park spaces. Because I think one of the connections the plan makes is that we're encouraging more residents to come to the regional center. And that means there's going to be more demand in the park spaces on not just the space themselves, but the facilities. And so we're going to see that connection and trying to kind of leverage some of that bonus zoning funding for our parks planners to be able to make those strategic decisions about whether it's parkland acquisitions or just investments in improving some existing parks. Okay, those are good questions and comments. We have another question from Anne, who asks, what will the next step of the package be after the free virtual public consultations? And Kasia explained that we're open to receiving comments until December 15th, and one of our surveys is open until November 30th. So that's the St. Pat's Day site in the north end. That survey is still open until November 30th. So just to clarify on that too, that we can receive comments by phone, email, letter, any way you can get in touch with us. We'll take comments that will be included in our analysis and review. Then we'll present what we heard to our steering committee, and something we call the What We Heard report. And then we will present the revised draft and start the adoption process sometime in the spring, Kasia indicates, through various committees and regional council. And then council will make a decision following a public hearing and then the plan needs to be reviewed by the province. So essentially, I guess I'll just kind of elaborate on this one, is that after we get through this consultation phase, we're kind of back to revising the plan and taking into account all the feedback received, not just on the established residential zone, but all the other designations, the industrials, the park space, all the other different topics. And then we'll be in that formal adoption process. And the next time that the broad members of the public be able to get a chance to make your voices heard will be at that public hearing. I mean, you can always get in touch with us in the intervening days, but that public hearing would be that kind of last step where regional council has a bit of that. I think it was a bit of a gut check to see what members of the public and key stakeholders think of the plan before they decide whether or not they want to approve it or send it back to staff to make some revisions. And actually, kind of the final step of that process is to send that plan that council approves to the province, and they review it to make sure it's consistent with the statements of provincial interest. And assuming that there's no concerns, usually it takes about a month or two. In this case, it's such a large plan; it's probably more like 2 months when it comes into effect. Okay. Okay, we caught up to the questions, so we might actually start reading Kasha and Brandon some of these answers, Ross, because they've been doing such a good job of answering that we're really not having to weigh in too much, other than maybe read their answers or elaborate a little bit. But it indicates here, is there a proposed minimum lot size for backyard suites? And Kasha explained, oh, we didn't beat it. No, but as a note, there's no minimum. There's no minimum lot size, but you would have to meet all the other zone requirements. So setbacks, maximum lot coverage, and accessory structure requirements. So if you can fit an accessory structure on your lot, then you could build an accessory. Then you could build a backyard suite. Probably the most Ross, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think probably the most constraining piece is probably the lot coverage.
Yeah, in most cases, that would be, and I guess I'll just add as well that in any case, this is, not seeing too many new lots in the regional center, but although we may, if there was a new lot, the lot would have to meet the minimum lot area for the ER zone. But then after that, as you mentioned, Ben, the lot coverage is usually kind of the limiting factor on where a backyard suite could be placed.
Yeah, and maybe just lot coverage is a term that we throw around as planning rate. We know it well, but and maybe you covered this in your presentation too. But the lot coverage is what it means is how much of your lot of your property is covered in buildings. So that includes your main building and any accessory buildings. As Ross explained earlier, typically we're proposing a lot coverage of 40%. So 40% of the lot could be covered in some sort of building. And if you're already at that, then you're not going to be able to fit a backyard suite on. But if you're at, say, 30%, then or 25, then you'd have you can fit in a building in the backyard. Then that might be an option for you. Okay. Well, it's gotten to the end of the questions there. So thanks you for everyone for weighing in, and thanks for Kasha and Brandon for doing such a great job answering those questions, making our evening easy for Ross and I. I just want to highlight that people can phone in too if you want to kind of interact that way. The phone number is in the Q&A, kind of further up, maybe about a third of the way down, and it's the phone number is 902-901-6948, and the conference ID is 485-288-283. Better off probably just looking it up in the Q&A if you're following online. Let's see. I don't know, Ross, do you have any other thoughts? Anything tweaked your mind from these questions that have come up that you want to elaborate on? Maybe at this time we can just go over the other opportunities for engagement one more time while we're waiting for other folks to call in. Yes, that sounds like a great idea. So I think that's slide 40 or slide 41. There we go. So just as a reminder, we already went over this, but we do have one more of these virtual meetings. So tell all your friends and neighbors and coworkers and pets
that we've got one more coming up on the 26th. I was mistaken earlier, but we do have a couple of walk and roll community tours currently planned, and those are being reviewed. So potentially still some walking tours there. So stay tuned, please, for those. We have an Ask Me Anything session planned for December 2nd, and we'll post details on where to find that soon, but that's online, so easy to catch that one. And feel free to invite a planner to your community meeting. So get in touch with us through the planhm@halifax.ca website that's noted there at the end. If you'd like to set up a virtual meeting with us to talk through Package B. And as always, you can send us an email at that email, planhm@halifax.ca by December 15th to get feedback in on the current draft.
Okay, well, I think we can give it a couple more minutes to see if any more questions come in. Oh, we do have some. No, it's just gotcha. Oh, there's a. We do have one more question, but we can keep things going. But if we start receiving a lot of questions, we don't have to go all the way to 8. If it's unlikely people who haven't logged in will log in the last little bit. But in any case, there's one more question from someone logged in as anonymous. As remind me when package B is scheduled to be active. So Cash is typing, we can beat her to it, Ross. You want to answer that one?
Yes. So we're targeting next summer to go to regional council for package B, and it would be sometime in the fall of 2021. We hope that package B would be approved by regional council and then reviewed and approved by the province.
Yeah. And I just add the caveat. Then we always have caveats on these, target dates and what we're working towards. I think it's realistic target, and we have been delayed due to the COVID-19 situation. But of course, we need to follow the lead of our decision makers, our council, and for whatever reason, there are a number of reasons why that timeline maybe wouldn't be hit. I don't think it would be sooner, but just those caveats that we're talking about, target dates, what we're working towards, and not a guarantee. It says, did your team consult with the councillors for the first draft? Let's see. Well, Ross, do you want to talk about the working with Cdac or?
Sure. Yeah, that's probably a good way to start answering this question. So thanks for that question, and we're finally caught up with Cash and Brandon there. So one way that we work with regional council on the draft document is that there's a committee called the Community Design Advisory Committee. You'll probably hear us call it Cdac for short. And that committee is comprised of councillors as well as some community members, so people that have expertise in certain areas. And we bring the draft plan to them for review, so they provide us with comments and feedback, and that's one of the sort of first lines of getting it reviewed and having some input from councillors. Not sure what else we can add to that, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's a great group of councillors in the for the regional centre, and so we are in communications. In addition to that. Cdac, we're in communications with them, and of course, as the plan moves forward, they'll be weighing in more detail, potentially giving some specific direction to either make adjustments or to go back and review it. But through package A and also the beginning part of package B, it's through that Cdac, the Community Design Advisory Committee, that is our primarily kind of steering committee for a project, which includes all the regional centre councillors plus the citizens who provide some really great feedback to us along the way.
That's right, and as well, once we go through the adoption process, and once the plan is actually ready to make its way to council, each of the community councils are usually involved in providing feedback as well. So even the councillors that are not located in the regional centre, of course, have an opportunity to see the plan and provide feedback once we're heading on the direction towards regional council with the plan as well.
Okay, yeah, and that's something Kasha indicated in her. She named some of these other committees that it will go through. So CPED, which is the Community Planning Economic Development Advisory Committee, all the community councils for the regional centre as well. And of course, the full regional council would review, and we need to approve the plan before it comes into place. comes into effect. Okay, well, it's been a lot of good questions and comments that some things I think highlighted for me today that I wasn't necessarily thinking about. Let's see. Okay. Well, we just had a quick little discussion here, and I think we don't need to keep the meeting going. I think we've for those of you who have tuned in, it's been very great to have you. I'll do one last call for any questions or comments in the Q&A, or there's still that phone-in number if anybody's wants to use that tool. And otherwise, I very much appreciate. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in. Hopefully, this was informative for you. And and up on the screen are a number of different ways to participate. So this is one of the things we're trying is these live virtual meetings. But again, if you wanted to reach out to us, we can set up our own virtual meetings. I think a lot of people are getting used to using whether it's we use Microsoft Teams at the municipality, as other people might be using Zoom. And we're open to receiving correspondence by email or any other way by December 15th. So I'm not seeing any more comments come in. So I think we can, for anybody who's still online or haven't already gone off and done something else with your evening, we're going to sign out. Very much thank you for taking your time to learn some things and have a good evening. So thank you again from